Bedroom community of Keensport, Tennessee, and it's a town of mostly factory workers and farmers and a town of 2,000 people, so pretty small.
Okay. When did you first come to Ashland?
I came here to become the town manager in August of 2003.
Okay. What was it? Was it like how it is now when you first came, or was it less developed? Or
There's been quite a bit of development in the 5 years I've been here, particularly near the interstate and on Route 1, and there's also been a lot of new residential housing that's been built in the last 5 years as well.
Did you have family members in Ashland when you came here, or did anyone come with you?
No.
So the town manager was your first job here then, too?
First job in Ashland, yes.
Have you had any other jobs?
I was a town administrator of Middleburg, Virginia before, and before that, the town manager of Gate City.
Have you enjoyed working here in Ashland so
Absolutely. It's a wonderful town. Not only do I work here, but I live here, and it's very convenient, being close to Richmond and D.C. and everywhere else. It's a very nice town.
How much schooling have you received over the years?
I earned a bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia's College at Wise. I've taken graduate coursework in public administration from George Mason University and Old Dominion University, and I'm a graduate of the Senior Executive Institute at UVA and the Darden School.
How do you feel about the college being here in Ashland?
I think the college is a crucial part of the town. Without the college, the town would never have survived. After the Civil War, the college moved here during the middle of Reconstruction when economic downtimes were throughout the Commonwealth in the South. And Ashland is a product of two things, I truly believe, the railroad and the college.
Do you think the relationship with the college and the town has changed over the years and either gotten better or worse?
I think it's improving steadily, specifically in the last 2 or 3 years. There's been ups and downs, I think, depending on what's happened between the community and the college. As the college has grown and expanded, I think there's occasionally been disgruntled citizens concerned about the expansion of the college, taking property off of the tax rolls, potential increase in number of students. But I think overall, the benefits of having a college here greatly outweigh any of the possible negatives, and that there's going to be some great partnerships forged between the town and the college in the future.
Do you remember or know anything about the railroad, and do you know what went on in the past with that?
Just history I've read in books and talked to other people from Ashland. I know the railroad came here in roughly the early 1840s. Ashland was a resort town for railroad executives with Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad. The town grew from that, and then also obviously became a major passenger stop on the southeast corridor between D.C. and Raleigh, North Carolina now, and is almost a midpoint between Boston and Florida.
Do you think there's a division between the different sides of the railroad? Because we've heard before that there might be.
There's always the cliche that living on the other side of the tracks, but I think there's diverse neighborhoods on both sides. Obviously, the biggest difference truly is the west side of town across the railroad tracks is obviously much more residential. The college doesn't have really as much a presence, as a small presence, but a limited presence on the western side of the tracks. The east side of the tracks, you have the majority of the college, a far majority of a commercial with Route 1 and the interstate and all the traffic and businesses that go with that. Those are really more of the differences than I think the types of neighborhoods. I think there's several different types of neighborhoods on both sides of the tracks. So.
Was anyone your family hasn't been here at all ever? Sorry.
I can't answer that one.
Yeah. What were the politics of the town like when you first got here? Has it changed at all?
I think when I first came here, there was still a lot of talk and concern of the Walmart case, which you're probably going to learn some about if you haven't already. I think there was still a pretty fresh wound at that time, but I think time has healed some of those political wounds amongst folks. Obviously, Walmart is an active and important part of the local economy here in Ashland. I know it's definitely a place that a lot of students utilize for the easy access and the type of products they have. So, we, as a town employee, I embrace all the businesses we have here in town as a part of our economic partners. So I guess I can't speak too much to the political side of it. So,
How do you feel about the Walmart personally? Do you think it's a good thing for the town, and are you happy with the expansion of Ashland?
I'll be happy to tell you what I think as town manager, but I would prefer not to give you my personal comments. As a town manager, I think the one good thing is there was a lot of concern about what would happen to the smaller mom and pop businesses when Walmart came to town. And I don't think we've seen the direct effects of the worst case scenario. I could not name one business that has closed directly because of Walmart in the last 5 years since it's opened. It opened right before I came here in July of 2003. I think there's been businesses that have had to shift their business plans and utilize different products and services. But I think from the fact of growing the economy near the interstate with the addition of the Hill Carter Parkway extension, which connects Route 54 to Walmart that just opened up within the last year to make it a little easier access from the interstate to the Walmart shopping center. I think those things combined with the economy in general are boosting the amount of businesses that are coming to town.
Were there any major businesses in Ashland when you first got here that stood out that have either gotten better or something has happened and they've not been doing as good now?
I think, globally, a lot of businesses are struggling right now with the economy as it is. I think we still have a lot of places that are flourishing and striving and doing well. I think most folks, particularly in local government, are thinking that the downturn will only last for so long, just as they all have in the past in American history, and that hopefully the local economy is strong enough. And the Richmond and Ashland economies have done fairly well, as some other parts of the country have been hit hard. The subprime mortgage crisis has not been as big a factor in Richmond and Ashland and Hanover County as it has in Northern Virginia or other large cities throughout the United States. So I'm hoping with those things and the fact that we still have a very low unemployment rate locally here in Hanover County that we can make it through. I think it really depends. There's been some businesses I'm sure that have had a fall off in the last few months based more on the economy than any other particular reason. So I think overall we're doing pretty well considering the issues that businesses are having to deal with today.
What's your neighborhood like now as opposed to when you first got here?
Not too much different. I live in a neighborhood. I live on John Street in a neighborhood that it was most of the houses were built post World War II in the late 40s, early 50s. It's a fairly quiet neighborhood. It's got a pretty good mix of both owner-occupied homes and rentals. There's no really apartments or condos. There's a couple of duplexes, but mostly it's single-family homes.
Do you know about any of the old historic buildings in Ashland?
A few. Depends on how detailed you want me to talk about a particular building. I mean, obviously there's a lot of history in the National Registry Historic District, which crosses from the college, comes down Railroad Avenue, cuts across 54 and goes into the residential areas. And you've got several homes on the railroad tracks and on Virginia Avenue that are, almost as old of a town, if not maybe a little bit older, around 150 years. Obviously, the college has been here in town since roughly 1867, so there's a lot of historic buildings obviously on campus. The chapel and the Washington Franklin Hall, those buildings. The downtown buildings have been here for quite some time, although there were more contemporary facades added to the Railroad Avenue businesses in the 50s. So they don't have the exact look that they did when they were constructed. But one thing you could just add as a general, interesting thing, before the interstate was built in the 50s and early 60s, the Lux owned a farm, and their house is basically where the interstate is now. And where the U-Crop shopping center was all farmland and cows. So it just sort of puts it in perspective how Ashland's changed over the last 50 years.
What was, do you think, when you were growing up in Tennessee, how was that different, do you think, from like how it was here at that time, if you know anything about that?
The town I grew up in was probably very similar to Ashland, with except two exceptions. The rail traffic where I grew up was based on coal mining in Southwest Virginia. It's all everything at that when I was a kid growing up was based around coal and tobacco. Very rural economy, and while we had railroads coming through town, it wasn't through the center of a business district as it is in Ashland. There's very few towns that have this setup of having a downtown district with railroad tracks split in it. The other big difference is we weren't particularly close to a large metro area like Ashland is. Even though Ashland has always been 15 miles from Richmond, Ashland is a lot closer because of the economy and the interstate and rail and the fact that a lot of folks that live here in Ashland work in Richmond. It's not as far away, I guess, in people's minds as it once was. If you go back 30 or 40 years ago, Ashland's economy was more direct in a sense that you didn't have to go buy things as much in downtown or in other places. There was a lot more retail here in Ashland to support Ashland and Hanover County, and a lot of that is left due to the combination over the last 30, 40 years of shopping malls, shopping centers. And that's typical in all towns. The town I grew up in was close to a small city of about 30,000. A huge difference from having Richmond of 200,000 people and then all the suburban areas, Henrico and Chesterfield, and plus the fact that you can be in D.C. in an hour and a half. It's only 90 miles away. That adds a different flair to Ashland. But I would say if you go back far enough, the two towns are probably pretty similar. They were small towns that have been around for quite some time and established by a small group of families and just slowly grown and expanded through the years.
Did you enjoy growing up in such a small town?
I did. I think it was probably a very comparable experience to folks who grew up here in Ashland. There's a sense of safety, a sense of security in neighborhoods. You knew everyone, which even to a certain extent that still follows today in Ashland, although it has grown quite a bit. So I think from a sense of a good place to raise children, I think where I grew up was good and very comparable to Ashland in that sense. And I think Ashland still has that today as well.
What was school like at your hometown when you were in like elementary school and middle school and high school?
Obviously, it was a very small school system. I think my graduating high school class had 180 kids in it, so very small schools. It was still a very good education, though. A lot of people, even though it was a very rural school system, went on to do great things coming out of that system. So we were fortunate in that sense. Had a lot of great teachers. And I think Ashland's the same way. Hanover County school system is one of the best public school systems in the state of Virginia, easily in the top 10. And I think that's a reason you see a lot more people wanting to move here and buy a house in town or in Hanover County because of a school system, and it's a great place to raise kids.
Has the amount of people that have been moving here gone up a lot lately?
I would say when I came here in 2003, which is barely 5 years ago, the total population within the corporate limits of Ashland was about 6,600, and now it's already up to about 7,400 in 5 years. So percentage-wise, that's a lot of folks. We suspect that the build-out of the town with the current corporate limits is probably about 12,000 citizens, and that could probably take place over the next 15 to 20 years. I would say we're going to have a pretty quick jump, though, over the next 5 years if the residential market regains some of its former strength. I could see us easily bumping up to 9,000 or 10,000 people over the next 5 to 7 years, which is a pretty huge percentage.
Did you have any early childhood memories from at your where you grew up that you think would be like what happened here?
I grew up spending my summers on my grandmother's tobacco farm, and if you go back into Hanover, a few years ago, it was a lot more rural economy. Obviously, it's not really a tobacco area here in Richmond, but it was very agricultural, particularly in western Hanover. Even in the eastern side of the county, if you go back 20, 30, and 40 years in Mechanicsville and Cold Harbor, those areas were dominated by agriculture. And I think that's the same everywhere, is that part of the economy is diminishing no matter where you're at. It's definitely not as large part of the economy in Southwest Virginia as it is now. The same here in Hanover. As land values have escalated, as assessments and taxes continue to go up, I think people are finding less and less ability to make a living full-time as a farmer. And there's a whole new couple generations of folks who have left agriculture. And we're seeing a lot of those lands from the former farms being divided up into subdivisions and developments. So,
Do you know if like religion and church is really important around here to the people, and has it always been that way?
I think so. I think as most places, particularly in the South and throughout Virginia, most communities have always had multiple churches in them. Obviously, Ashland, like most small towns in Virginia, is predominantly, at least from a church standpoint, Protestant, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian. We do have a Catholic church in town. We do not have a Jewish synagogue or anything of that nature, but Richmond provides various types of worship. So I think there's always been the opportunity close by for anyone of any religion to choose Ashland as home and have accessibility to their religion.
Do you have any family stories from the Civil War or any of the historic things that have happened here in the South?
I mean, I'm descended from several people that fought in the Civil War for Virginia. Obviously, it was in a different area in Hanover County, but I had a lot of relatives that fought in several battles in Virginia, Cold Harbor, which is here locally, and places in North Carolina and Tennessee. Nothing in particular of great interest, but yeah.
Did you know anything about the trolley system that ran through Ashland?
You mean the electric trolley system that ran until 1937?
Yes.
I'm familiar with that. That was a very important fact that a lot of people don't know is Richmond had the first electric car line in the country. A lot of people assume it's San Francisco or New York, but Richmond had the first, and one of the popular lines at the time was the Ashland trolley line, which you can still see the right-of-way even cleared on part of the way down to Richmond. The one big thing that's there now that would not allow it to continue unless you build a bridge is 295. But there's a little bit of development in a few places down in Henrico County where the trail used to be, but you can still walk the trail here in Ashland. Hanover County has a park that sort of protects the area, so you can still see the remnants. You can't see really tracks or anything, but you can see where the right-of-way was. It's something that I think in hindsight would be very valuable today if we had a daily commuter system to Richmond and other places. Unfortunately, we've developed over the last 50 years, like most communities, and put our emphasis in planning and design around car travel. So,
what do you do for fun around the town now?
I play a lot of music, play in a band, and we play occasionally in town, play around Richmond. I'll be quite honest with you, we have to work quite a bit, so I don't really do much. I try to travel when I can, but that's really about it.
I think that's about it. I think that's about it. You answered a lot of questions for us, and thank you.
I was the guinea pig, huh?